Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Welcome to the Slumpbuster with Juju and Dre, episode 12, recording here on Saturday, October 19th, 2019. Find us on all major streaming platforms. On today's episode, we break down LeBron James' comments on the Daryl Morey China situation, give you a look at the Xfl Draft, the NBA Western Conference, and much, much more. Without further ado, welcome to our show.
We have a right to free speech.
Yes, we do all have freedom of speech, but at times there are ramifications for the negative that can happen when you're not thinking about others and you're only thinking about yourself.
Whoa, what's going on, kids?
They're trying to change people's lunch. They don't realize it harms people financially, physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
Eric, it's okay.
This is the future. This is not the past. This is the future, and the future moves fast. This is our moment, our story to tell. This is history begun. This is the XFL.
Welcome to the podcast with Juju and Dre. Welcome to our podcast. You like the theme song yet, Dre?
It needs a little bit more mixing and editing, I think.
A little bit more mixing and
nice.
Fair enough. I think this will get us by until our special guest comes through with our real intro. So things are trying to come together. If you're a podcast listener, we are slowly working on our real theme song, which is going to sound a lot better than Welcome to the Podcast with Juju and Dre.
At least let's hope, right? So if it doesn't sound better than that, we might be in some trouble.
I was working on that all day, Dre, and you're just dissing on all my hard work. It came to me in a dream last night.
I mean, it's better than what I could do, so.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, want to test it? We can go ahead and wing it here. What's your best theme song, Dre?
I am not a good singer, and honestly, I don't want to scare away any of our listeners, so let's not do that.
All right. Well, we got a bit of a busy news day. A lot of stuff was going on this week. We actually have a bit of a tie-in from one of last week's headlines that we're going to be starting off the podcast. The first, Dre, I just kind of want to throw it out there. So you and I, we're both capitalists. We're both strong believers in the free market, pro get that bag culture. But Mr. LeBron James, King James, or maybe I should call him Emperor James, took that to a whole different level this week. This is going to be a follow-up to our China story last week, which we thought would have ended and died with Daryl Morey. One of the big things I said when this topic came to light, we hadn't heard from LeBron James. We're got to hear from LeBron James.
Yep.
And I don't think I was prepared for what he had to say or some of the news headlines coming out of what LeBron had to say. What's kind of like your initial thoughts on this story? Because there's some speculation that he was out there trying to get Daryl Morey fired through Adam Silver. There's just, in general, the sheer fallout of what he said. Actually, let me just read off the quote real quick. Here,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think when we all sit back and learn from the situation that happened, understand that what you could tweet or could say could affect people. We all talk about the freedom of speech. Yes, we all have freedom of speech, but at times there are ramifications for the negative that can happen when you're not thinking about others and you're only thinking about yourself. Seems an awful like LeBron was thinking about himself with this statement, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, I mean, the thing is Daryl Morey, in my opinion, wasn't thinking about himself, right? Like the tweet, there was no way that he could make any money off it. Like it wasn't really going to do anything for Daryl Morey outside of, hey, here's sort of my opinion on the issue, right? And some people would say it gets a little bit political, but I mean, Daryl Morey's not going to receive cash from the U.S. government or anything like that, right? And so it's complete just freedom of speech. And so there's no way I think Daryl Morey was only thinking about himself. In fact, I don't think Daryl Morey was thinking negatively or in any one direction. He was just speaking his mind and his opinion.
Going further, I don't want to get into a war or sentence feud with Daryl Morey, but I believe he was uneducated on the situation at hand, and he spoke. And so many people that could have been harmed, not only financially, but physically, emotionally, spiritually. So just be careful when we tweet and what we say and what we do. It's come on, LeBron. Is this really how we're going to do this here? Basically, LeBron just told Daryl Morey, shut up and dribble. That's what happened here, right?
Yeah, it's exactly right. And LeBron has been one of the most outspoken NBA players that we've seen. In fact, athletes in general, right? Across the NFL, NBA, MLB, and other sports, whether they're major or minor sports, he's definitely been one of the most outspoken athletes. And he has always been on the side of let us speak our minds, because normally it benefits him. And you're exactly right. In this time, Now it's something that doesn't benefit LeBron. And I really like LeBron. I appreciate a lot that he's done, especially in like the Cleveland, Ohio area, right? Like he has a school. He does a lot of great things for the community. But this time, like it's negatively impacting his financial opportunities. And I think he doesn't like it.
Yeah, no, I mean, clearly, because LeBron, we talk about how popular the NBA is in China. A big part of that is going to be the face of the NBA, LeBron James. I mean, okay, so some of the numbers, he makes roughly about $32 million annually from his deal with Nike over there. Some have speculated, so Nike overall, about $6 billion, give or take, according to the folks over at Forbes and Statista.com. So clearly there's a lot of money, a lot at stake. LeBron has a movie to go out there and publicize in Space Jam 2 here in a couple months. Obviously, we talked about what such a big deal film is in the Chinese market, but it just comes off so hypocritical because the way we look at LeBron James, in particular with what all he's contributed, as you mentioned, to social causes in the Ohio area, abroad, etc., it seems like he's speaking out both sides of his mouth here. He's trying to defend his bag, but he's also like over here basically restricting others' like speech. And I don't agree with it. I think it's a terrible look for him. And it just, whenever you look at when he takes stances like this on any other social cause, it just seems like he's going to undercut himself each and every time when you like reflect back on it. One of the big things that's getting thrown in his face a lot, a couple years ago during Martin Luther King Day, he retweeted this: "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our lives begin to the end of the day. We become silent, all things that matter." And then he's telling someone to speak down when it comes to an injustice he perceives in society. Regardless if you agree with Daryl Morey, if you don't agree with Daryl Morey, if there are human rights issues and you're silent, then it just straight up being a hypocrite.
Yeah, I definitely think that it is, right? And that's the thing is LeBron's gotten so upset when people tell him the equivalent, like you said, the shut up and dribble. And he wants to be able to speak his mind, and then he acts like, and I really do think that he cares about social issues, social justice. And so I think he is compassionate, but you're exactly right. You come off as this major hypocrite, and that like, hey, how can you only stand up when it's beneficial to you or it's impacting your community? But then when somebody else stands up for another community, right, and it might hurt you financially, then you're going to tell them to stop. Like, it's just totally unfair and is hypocritical, right? Like, and so the NFL owners, a lot of people, they can make the same arguments when LeBron James supports Colin Kaepernick, right? And I don't want to get too into the political debate of it, but they can easily say,
we're in it, you know?
Exactly. And so they can easily say like, hey, LeBron James, you're costing us money. You need to shut up, right? Like, because that's the argument for a lot of the NFL owners for why they won't rehire Colin Kaepernick, and sort of the argument for why he's been moved out of the league. Now, you could say his stats are declining or he had only a few good years on him or whatever it is, but a lot of it sometimes is Colin Kaepernick, and talking about that issue will cost you money, and yet LeBron James can take Colin Kaepernick's side. And now when somebody's costing LeBron James money, hey, they got to be quiet, right? They need to be disciplined, and we got to push for disciplining of Daryl Morey. And I've heard reports as far as like LeBron James wanted him fired. I don't know how true that is, but I do hear that when Adam Silver went over to China to meet with the Nets and the Lakers, that LeBron James did say, hey, you need to discipline Daryl Morey in some type of way.
Yeah, and some of the arguments reportedly, again, from that statement is Adam Silver basically told LeBron, like, hey, listen, we don't fine or suspend players when you talk about Trump or anything else regarding big major political issues in this country. So how can we do that to Daryl when he's just expressing in 7 words on Twitter a statement like that? And like you said, you can argue that he's costing money for the NBA too when they do that. You're going to tell me that the NBA viewers who do lean a little bit more conservative aren't turned off by the NBA when you have players who are making these kind of statements? And I think it shows too. You could argue that the NBA has lost ratings because of stuff like, well, obviously the parity issue when you have the Cleveland Cavaliers and Golden State Warriors neck and neck each and every year for the last 5 years. But I do think it was a little bit a part of it by the way that the NBA has consistently gone down this road, leaning a little bit to the left of the political spectrum. That you are alienating a certain segment of your fans.
Yeah, no, most definitely. And I think a lot of that comes from the background that these guys have, right? They a lot of times were poor Black children, right? Sometimes grew up in either a single family home or a poor neighborhood, right? And so it makes sense that they would be left politically leaning. And you're exactly right. So I know Steve Kerr has been outspoken about some of like the player and social issues, right? You got LeBron James and a lot of these players that are outspoken. And you're exactly right. They do tend to be a little bit more on the left side of the spectrum. And so they potentially could be costing the NBA some money. Now, luckily, I think the NBA's product is just so good that they can withstand a few of those type of things. Right? To me, the NBA is super exciting. You're always seeing the ball moving. It's high scoring, so you're getting hundreds of points go up, whereas in football, it's a little bit slower, right? Same with baseball. It's a little bit slower. You don't see 100-point games and stuff like that. So the NBA, I think, can withstand some of it. But at the same time, you're exactly right. Like, they're still potentially losing money when LeBron James stands up, and makes statements. And yet now that, again, it's costing LeBron James his money, somebody else is making statements, he doesn't like it. And it is extremely hypocritical.
What's the recourse? Because if you're LeBron James, you're put in the situation right now where you are getting it from all sides after the statement. Like, he released a couple insincere kind of apologies. Not really. I don't even know kind of what his addresses to the statement he made were trying to be. He's trying to like back off basically right now. He's trying to take a big step back because he knew he just put his foot in his mouth and needs to like get out of the situation as fast as possible. Because there has been protests already where you're seeing his jerseys get burned in Hong Kong, where you're seeing like American fans really push back at like the ideas he's expressing. Barstool released a whole shirt with his face on there wearing a Chinese uniform right now, which, hey, I'm sure it's a big ticket seller for them, but this is just not good to look, especially for his legacy long term. Like when you're trying to go neck and neck with Jordan as one of the greatest players of all time, and he's built up such a reputation when it comes to that comparison between Michael Jordan of just being such a better guy, such a better person, because for as good of a player as Michael Jordan was, his off the court antics or off the court like personality is very maligned in most people's minds that were around during the prime Jordan years. Compare that to LeBron James, who has always had this reputation of being this generally good guy, a good family man, always thinking about others, not necessarily thinking about himself. This unselfish character has just completely stained that reputation as he's completely shifted towards just being a, money hungry capitalist like the rest of us, honestly.
Well, honestly, you're starting to even see like bigger waves around the NBA just in general, right? Like now fans are showing up with these, free Hong Kong signs or whatever it is that they're holding up. Like you said, there's the jersey pictures of LeBron James in a China jersey. And so he's started sort of a chain reaction, right? That I don't know if there's much stopping it. I think it'll all die down by the time, we actually get into season and people actually care about the sport a little bit more. But like he might get flack for this literally the entire season, right? Especially when he plays Houston.
So we talked about stuff like Space Jam 2. We talked about tangible things like Nike sales, jersey sales. It's interesting in such a partisan time we live in. There, for every reaction, there's an equal or opposite reaction. So if you offend one side of the political aisle, you're going to just appeal so much harder to the other side. So it's going to be interesting to see whether long-term this is going to be good for LeBron's brand, bad for LeBron's brand. I think at long-term it's ill-advised. It seems like this statement's going to come back and haunt him. You do hope that maybe he just puts on an MVP year and we could just forget about this, especially you as a Lakers fan for sure.
I know. I don't want them having any more distractions. They don't need any distractions. They live in LA, right? Like they're always under the spotlight anyways. And so now all this negative publicity, especially with all the different trades that we made and brought in new players, which we'll get to, here in a little bit. But yeah, I think it's super interesting, right? And I think this has been one of the most like broad sort of subjects when it comes to sport, in that you see so many fans, players, GMs that are involved in this topic that isn't even like related to the United States. And so I think it's just a really interesting thing. Yeah. So I had said last week, right, that if I'm the commissioner, I fire Daryl Morey, but that's me thinking from like a business standpoint and like, hey, you're costing us money. Yeah, I'm getting you gone. But I will say that I am proud of the NBA. And at least they're being consistent, right? And that they've said, we value free speech. And even if somebody else doesn't like that free speech, right, and it happens to go against one of our players or it costs us money, we're going to value that free speech. So I think that's admirable. And I think they made the right decision.
Well, there's a couple things that I want to throw out there. So it's always been said, freedom isn't free. That even if that involves like $700 million in your potential revenue over the next 20 to 30 years when it comes to Chinese NBA relationships. And honestly, I'm kind of surprised. So from a Lakers standpoint, if anyone was going to cause you issues with China, I thought it was going to be Jello Ball.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I mean, we thought LeVar Ball and like the Ball family was bad with that whole China issue. And never in my mind did I think that there would be a worse China issue that would come about. But there is. So
yeah. Well, okay. We talked about it. We've talked in circles about it. It's obviously very controversial. There's a lot going on here. You're right. Probably the 24-hour news cycle will filter this out. LeBron has probably one of the best publicist teams out there of all athletes. And he does – listen, I'm going to say this. LeBron does a ton of great things. I just don't want all that to be staying long-term when it comes to, like, is he doing this because he truly cares, or is he doing this because he could see it as profitable long-term?
Yeah.
So,
and honestly,
yeah.
I think it's going to take even a few years for us to really see how this all pans out, right? Because like I said, I'm proud of the NBA and the direction that they went and said, hey, we are going to be consistent and we're going to stick up for our fans, our players, and, you know, our front offices and front office employees. But a few years down the road, I'm just interested to see if Space Jam cannot be shown in China, right? And the Chinese government says, no more NBA games over here, and Nike loses billions or millions of dollars, I should say, right? And so does the NBA. Then I wonder if people change their tune or not. So,
well, get ready for the Get Your Popcorn movie review of the original Space Jam with a less controversial athlete, Michael Jordan.
Yeah. This is just good, clean fun. There's no foreign countries in this one. Maybe some aliens, but from outer space, not from outside of our borders, right? So
different kinds,
different types of aliens. Nothing wrong with either alien. I like aliens, right? So
both are good. All righty, man. I think we gotta move on from this. We gotta get into the actual on the court product, which is ironic because we're talking about the NBA Western Conference, which still involves the Lakers. So
and the Rockets.
Lakers, Rockets. We're going to see who's the most distracted team and go from there. I'm actually going to look forward to that Daryl Morey LeBron matchup now. Lakers, Rockets, that might be a little bit of a fun game to watch.
Yeah, and I think if you're the Rockets now, like you're sort of in that position where you have to keep Morey around, right? Like the NBA commissioner just told China, no, we're not firing him. And so like the Rockets can't now go back and be like, well, we're firing him on our own, right? So I think Daryl Morey is going to be around, and it's going to get interesting, the Rockets versus LeBron James, I think.
Okay, so with that said, so Western Conference, it's so deep. There's so many good teams, so many stars, a lot going on. Got a little bit disappointing with news of like injuries within the Western Conference. Obviously, Zion, I believe Russ had to leave the game a little bit last night with ankle injury. Hope he's okay. There's really only 4 teams we can eliminate off the bat when it comes to this conference. Suns, Grizzlies, T-Wolves, and the Thunder, who are probably going to have to unload Chris Paul's contract at some point. So with that said, Dre, you want to go 8 through 1 as far as your potential playoff team or your playoff teams as you see them finishing?
Yeah. So I'll work my way up. I guess some of my honorable mentions is what I'll start with. I think the Mavericks, the Pelicans, and the Kings are going to be tough, and a lot tougher than some people think. I know the Kings have sort of been the butt of the joke for, probably the last decade, maybe 2. But I think they actually do have a tough team that you're not going to want to play if, let's say, your starters are needing rest or you're a little bit banged up, right? Or even if you're just on a tough road trip, I don't think you're going to want to see them. The Pelicans so far have looked good to me. If Zion's healthy, and I have questions about that, right? Like he's I've heard almost 300 pounds or something and jumping around, and he's got a knee injury. We know that he had injuries last year. Can he stay healthy? I don't know at that weight. I think he needs to lose weight, but he's good. And then the Mavs, right? They're going to have 2 All-Stars with 2 European All-Stars, I should say, with Luka Doncic and the unicorn that they got from New York. So they're my honorable mentions. Next up, so in the 8th spot, I've got the Spurs, in my opinion. The 7th spot, I got the Blazers. The 6th spot, I have the Warriors. The 5th, I'm going with the Utah Jazz. 4th, I think the Los Angeles Lakers. 3rd, I've got the Houston Rockets. So it'll be fun, those two teams battling out, like we said. 2nd, the Nuggets. And then 1st, Los Angeles Clippers.
Okay, so, I mean, let's start off with the teams you kind of have on that bubble right now. So we have the Mavericks, we have the Pelicans, the Kings. So you're right. It's going to be interesting to see. The most exciting team out of that bunch right now for me is going to be the Pelicans. I loved what I was seeing in preseason out of them. Zion's a lot of fun to watch. He's the real deal, but he's hurt.
Yeah.
It sucks that he's hurt. I was looking forward to Tuesday night being able to turn on my TV and see Zion Williams. And there is no other reason I would watch a Pelicans-Raptors game besides that right now. No disrespect to you, Pascal. I know you got paid, but you're not the star of the game. It was going to be Zion right now. Now, yeah.
Like, even Kyle Lowry, right? Nobody cares that. Like, Kyle Lowry's been an all-star, but it's Zion Williamson.
Yeah, we just want to see how it looks. It's a new, different kind of athlete that we're seeing out there on the court with the way that guy is so nimble on his feet, able to move around at that frame. But that frame's already having a little bit of pushback right now when it comes to his body stability and trying to stay on the court. And this is his rookie year. So it's a little scary. I mean, I don't anticipate his shoe blowing out on the court each and every time he plays. But I do expect there's going to be some times where he's just going to miss a 10 to 20 game stretch every now and then just because of a little tweak or twinge in his knee or his ankle or something lower body extremity wise.
Yeah, and I think the thing about Zion, so he plays in some ways very efficiently when it comes to scoring, right? Like his scoring percentage is very high just because he's constantly going for dunks and lobs and stuff like that. But then with that comes he has to use a ton of energy and he's jumping up and down, right, to make all of his points. He doesn't have that great of a jump shot from even within the arc, let alone from outside the arc. Like, I think he can shoot a little bit, but when you're playing just athletic, right, which he is an athlete and he's a freak of nature athlete, everybody knew that, but you're jumping up and down every single time. You weigh 300 pounds and then you have the force of gravity pulling on you. I think you're right. Like, I think there's the possibility that he doesn't stay healthy and, you know, there's some major health concerns for him being this heavy as a rookie.
Well, with the team constructed around him, I definitely like how they're set up, though. You do talk about like stuff like lobs. Lob City is back between him and Lonzo, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
With the way that Zoe can pass that ball, I think that's a perfect match made in paradise. And then they went out there and acquired J.J. Redick this year. I love J.J. Redick as a player. He's one of the better, most efficient shooters of all from the behind the arc of all time. And fun fact about J.J. Redick, his teams have never made the play or missed the playoffs. So maybe the Pelicans may still just get in there yet, just on the backs of their legendary three-point shooter.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point, right? As J.J. Redick, he provides that floor spacing that allows Zion to get into the lane and be able to score all his points right around the basket, right? So if somebody's able to shut down Zion, he can just dish it out. J.J. Redick's right there, and he's going to hit you with a dagger three, right?
Holiday's a guy. Holiday's a dog as well, too. I like this team. It's a good young team, well coached. They're going to compete. I don't want to completely dismiss the Mavericks or Kings, too, right now. De'Aaron Fox, he really showed up last year. Marvin Bagley had a pretty decent year. I'm still salty about those two not being on Team USA when it came to the World Cup. But that's not going to take away from anything as far as them being able to make it to the 7 or 8 seeds potentially and then get bumped in the first round because, hey, they could have used that extra time in Team USA camp. But I'm excited, too, to see this Mavericks team as well. Porzingis back on the court. We haven't seen him since that ACL injury. I wonder – I'm looking forward to that first matchup against the Knicks. That's like one of those, like, on my calendar bookmark moments because I kind of want to see him lay it on him. And so it's interesting. Mark Cuban has developed a team. He wanted to veer away from the classic draft from the NCAA system that's been in America for the last few decades. And he's going out of his way to get these European stars. As he says, they're better, more equipped for the NBA challenge. So this is where we're going to put it to the test. Can these guys really compete within the Western Conference?
Yeah, no, and I'm really excited for it. And we saw that the Europeans, right? They know how to play ball. We were talking about the World Cup, right? And obviously America didn't win it. Now, granted, we didn't have our best players like everybody else did, but still, like, Europeans can play ball, and they've got two of the best Europeans, right, on this team. And we sort of already know, as long as Porzingis can come back from that injury and continue to play like he has been, or like he has in the past at least. And then you have Luka Doncic, right? Like, that dude is just fantastic. He's a phenomenal basketball player. I think they're going to be a really interesting team to watch.
Okay. Next, so let's start getting into your actual playoff teams you have here. So starting with we're going to start with the 7 and 8 seeds right now. So the Spurs, like you said, best coach in the NBA with Greg Popovich there. Their team, they picked up some guys in there, like with Marcus Morris, who's always been a good solid 4 there. They have, obviously they have DeRozan. It's kind of an interesting constructed team. Aldridge is there. I don't know. Like, I don't buy into necessarily the talent, but if any coach is going to be able to fit these pieces together, it would be Popovich. I kind of, my personal thing, I wouldn't be surprised if you told me the Spurs missed it, just because I don't think the talent could keep up with the Western Conference at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But good coaches, they tend to manage to pull these kind of rosters together. Yeah, and I don't remember the last time the Spurs missed the playoffs. I'm sure there's been a time in recent history. I think I've heard this one. I want to say it was all the way back in 98. Yeah, and which is just an insane stat, right? So we talked about the JJ Redick's teams never missing the playoffs. Like, these Greg Popovich teams never miss the playoffs either, right? And you're exactly right. I think the talent, I don't know if it's there just to compete at the level of the other teams in the Western Conference. And that's why I think the teams that we have in the top 8, right, especially your top 6 teams, they're just so talented. I just don't think that there's any way that they miss the playoffs. Now, they might move around, right? Maybe the Clippers fall to 2, or, the Lakers fall to 5 or 6. But there's just so much talent in the West. And the Spurs, I don't think, have that, especially Aldridge is getting older. DeMar DeRozan's always been good, but obviously he's never been the guy to make his team, like, superior to everybody else. And so I think you're exactly right. DeRozan's going to go down in the Hall of Very Good when his career is over. NBA Hall of Fame is kind of fast and loose with who they induct. But and he is a fantastic player, right? Like, this is not a knock on DeMar DeRozan. I just don't think he's the piece that will get you an NBA championship. I mean, there's a lot of guys like that. But perfect example. Look what Toronto did in just the one season he was gone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So moving into the Blazers. So Dame Dalla really showed off that he can lay down those bars, but can he actually elevate this team in the postseason? We saw him basically end the super team, loosely super team in OKC with that killer half-court shot that he had. But then they get swept by the Warriors. Swept. And this, keep in mind, Kevin Durant was out that entire series. Yep. And Boogie, too. And Boogie. And, yeah, just classic Splash Bros. Klay Thompson, Steph Curry combined to knock this team out in 4. So I guess I don't know how much belief I have in the Blazers whenever I see that. Because if there was ever a time for them to elevate themselves into potentially being a championship team, it was last year. It was wide open for them to do it. Yeah, no, I think their ceiling's limited. I also noticed that the Blazers, they play a small ball, right? But last year, the team that's better at small ball than the Blazers is the Warriors, right? And we saw how that ended up. But now, like, when you normally go with small ball, it's because your guards and your wings tend to have, like, just more skill than some of your big guys.
But there's some teams that are big, but still really skilled. And that's the thing, like, I like about the Lakers. They're big, but their bigs are all really skilled. Like, they can dribble the ball. Anthony Davis can dribble the ball. LeBron James can dribble the ball, right? The Clippers are also a really long team. That's what I think helped the Raptors win is, like, you have guys like a Kawhi Leonard that are just really freaking long. And, again, they're still really skilled. And so small ball only helps you if your small players are more skilled than everybody else, right?
Yeah, you're right. They are terribly lined up against this top tier in the Western Conference.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a shame because, I do like Damian Lillard. I think that he's one of my more fun players to watch in the league. It's going to be interesting to see long-term if he does end his career with Portland. Because I know that he has expressed multiple times that's where he wants to be. This is the team he wants to stick it out with. And he's been the first to criticize some of these players whenever they go to form up these super teams. So is he going to be a man of his word and stick it out with Portland long term? Or is he going to fall into this trap where I need to win a title for my legacy? Is Portland going to get me there? I don't think it is.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think Portland, it's just when it comes to the NBA, like we talked about this a little bit in baseball, that you could accomplish quite a bit and not being in a big market and having, a roster that isn't the highest paid. But in the NBA, it's just different, right? Like the Golden State Warriors sort of became a big market, and the Bay Area has been growing. It's been booming. The Cleveland Cavaliers just happened to be good because they got one of the best players ever to be born in Ohio, right? Like that just happened. But other than that, it's usually your Celtics who've been a historic franchise. So even if Boston's not the biggest city, like the historic franchise people want to play with, it's been the Lakers, right? Or your other big time either franchises or big cities. And
Miami, zero state income tax, stuff like that.
Yeah, like all that big stuff, right? And even Miami, right? They needed sort of a super team to form down there to win it. And so with Portland, I just don't ever really see them getting to that level.
Yeah. Well, let's move into this next grouping here. So we have the Warriors and the Jazz. So the Warriors, obviously, 5 straight trips to the finals. Unfortunately, that's probably going to end this year.
Mm-hmm.
They have a championship mentality when it comes to players like Steph Curry, but that's not going to be – that's sentiment. It's not going to be expressed by his number 2. I love what D'Lo did with the Nets last year, but viably, I don't think he's going to be able to keep up, or certainly he's not the most efficient three-point shooter, even though he can shoot threes.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that really plays to the Warriors' strengths. Who I'm looking at really this season is going to be Steve Kerr, because it's long been speculated how good of a coach is Steve Kerr, because obviously he's had the most talented roster in NBA history the last 4 years, or at least the most talented starting lineup in NBA history the last 4 years since he's been there. So we've always had that kind of like question of his true acumen as a play caller.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is going to be his time to step up. If he can still get this team to the playoffs, I don't know if Klay Thompson is going to be ready. ACL injuries. In terms of the NFL, we've seen players come back from them, but I don't think it's nearly as strenuous as it is for a basketball player to have that type of injury, at least in my mind. I may be wrong. I'm not a doctor by any means, but that's kind of how I see it in a game where you're constantly having to jump up and down and really put a little bit of torque into that thing. I'm a little bit worried about Klay Thompson's ability to come back specifically in a playoff run.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I don't know if you even want to risk that if you're the Warriors this year, right? Like, obviously, Klay Thompson's one of your max level players. You're paying him pretty good money right now, and he's been a great player for you. But if you rush him back into this playoff situation where you might be the 5th or the 6th seed, right? Like, so that means you're going to have tough matchups no matter what. So if you're on the 6th side, you're going to have to go against the 3 and then the 2 and then, possibly the 1 after that. And do you think Klay Thompson's going to be that big of the difference maker, especially coming off, fresh from an ACL injury? In my opinion, it's just better like, hey, we'll just rest you the entire year, right? Unless the doctors say, hey, 100%, like he's good to go. and we can have him playing, then I'd say, okay, if the doctors say it and Clay wants to get back out there, but I just don't see how it does that much good for him. And then, like you said, the D'Lo Steph backcourt that they have right now, it's offensively, I think, will be very fun to watch. Like, they're very good shooters. D'Lo, like you said, isn't the most efficient at threes, but I think he is developing as a guard. But defensively, though, like, they are going to be so bad. I mean, there is even a video, and I think Steph was taking it easy on this, like, high school or middle school kid, but he got blown by like a high schooler and couldn't play defense on a high schooler, right? And again, I'm sure Steph was taking it easy, so I'm not going to, like, call him out and be like, he sucks at defense. But he's not the best defender, and neither is D'Lo, right? And so I think there's a lot of holes right now. And obviously they lost, Kevin Durant, arguably number 1, number 2, or number 3 in the world. Right?
Well, not just Durant. They also lost Iguodala. Mm-hmm. They also lost, Pat Livingston. They lost Sean Livingston as well. Mm-hmm. And so they lost a lot of size on this team right now. Mm-hmm. Didn't even Kayvon Looney sign somewhere else too, if not mistaken?
Yeah, I don't remember. And then you're right. Like, Draymond Green too, that's another thing, is he's we've seen him start to, like, regress and go downward. I think that might be due to age. But, like, if Draymond can't even, play at the same level that he has been in the past, that's another thing, that hurts him.
Okay, I was mistaken. Kayvon Looney is still alive and well on the Warriors roster. But still, that's a lot of depth to lose and a lot of length to lose in an NBA where you have these mountains of teams like the Lakers, the Clippers, who defensively are just so stout. I think this team is just a poor matchup for those teams. Similarly, if I'm going to say that the Blazers match up poorly against these squads, I think I got to say the same thing about the Warriors right now. Mm-hmm. All right. Let's get into this next team here. So the Jazz have long been compared to the Boston Celtics. A lot of people have used the term that they're the Boston Celtics of the Western Conference when you consider you have a young team, young coach in Quinn Snyder, and fundamentally they've just been one of the better teams in basketball the last few years. But I actually kind of think you have them a little too high. I think fundamentally they're great, awesome, but eventually the fact that they don't really have a true star is going to bite them in the ass, and it always does in the playoffs in particular. So maybe actually you have them just right. They're a decent regular season team, so they'll get a decent seed, but they're probably a first-round exit for me because with how competitive this conference is and how many stars are in it, I just don't believe that Mike Conley is enough. I don't believe that Rudy Gobert is enough to get them over the hump.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, I think they're a good team. And again, I'll say that they're going to be one of the teams you don't want to play on a night-to-night basis, right? Especially, we know how bad Jazz fans can be when it comes to tormenting players, right? And having them players. So being on the road, playing against this tough team, it is going to be difficult. But you're right. They're still, Donovan Mitchell had a really good first year, not as good of a second year, though still he's a decent player. We know he has it in him. Mike Conley, like, you're right. Is that really enough to put them over the hump? He's also 32 years old, right? So I don't know how much that will have an impact on him, but we all know what happens in sports. You tend to hit the end of your life pretty quickly when it comes to being a pro level athlete. And so I think they're exciting to watch. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up in the top 4, but at the same time, I have them out of it right now in 5 or 6 range.
Okay, so your top 4 seeds here: Lakers, Rockets, Nuggets, Clippers. A lot of movement between these rosters right now. Well, maybe not so much for the Nuggets. Actually, the Nuggets are kind of a surprise team in this grouping here. Certainly, like, the least exciting team to talk about in terms of how much roster movement has taken place. I don't want to completely disrespect Joker there. I think he's definitely one of the star players of the NBA, but I don't know if a center is enough to really carry a team anymore.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. But at the same time, he is a monster of a center, right? And he's unlike what a lot of people have seen in the past. So he's extremely good. I don't know if there's very many big men that could slow him down, and amongst these teams in the West, right, that are really good. And so I think it's going to be more of containing everybody else and just hoping the Joker doesn't put up more than 30 on you, which I don't think he will in a lot of cases. I think I see him in that like 25 points per game range or something like that. But I think it's the game plan against them is contain and keep everybody else down and let the Joker, he's sort of just going to do Joker things, right? And we already saw one Joker movie come out and people were panicked about it. I think you got to panic a little bit about this Joker too. I've seen people rank them as high as number 1 though. So,
well, I think the fact that he's their main guy, their lone guy, is going to catch up to them. I know they have other players. Don't get me wrong. They have Murray there, who some will argue was overpaid this offseason. But I think you do need a sidekick here. So this Joker needs a sidekick. He needs his Harley Quinn, unfortunately. And I don't think he really has one quite yet on this Nuggets roster. I think they're going to be, again, another case of a great regular season team, because we've seen LeBron teams and certainly the Rockets last year, like, ease up in the regular season, save up all their ammunition for the playoffs here. Mm-hmm. And I think they might even be able to live up to your projection here of the 2 seed right now, with that said. But I don't buy them as a playoff team, to be honest. I don't buy them as a championship team. That's maybe I'm going to be eating crow, but that's the way I see it.
No, I think you're exactly right. And that's the thing when it comes to the playoffs. So I think to get to the playoffs and to have a good record, right, you need the deep bench and stuff like that, just because there's a lot of games, 82 games, and having that deep bench can help you pull out some wins to get into the playoff spot. But when you're actually in the playoffs, right, you're mostly playing your starters the majority of the time, right? 75, 80% of the time, it's going to be your starters. And starters in the West are going to be all-stars. And when you only have one of them, you're at a disadvantage. So,
yeah. So, Lakers on the court, putting away all that other stuff we talked about earlier. It's headlined by 2 guys, LeBron James and Anthony Davis.
Mm-hmm.
And so far in preseason, these guys have looked really good together. I can't even front. I can't even lie about this. They're looking like a perfect fit. Hell, I even saw Skip Bayless talking about how good this team is. Skip Bayless. Skip was talking about how good this team is. And you know that just burned his soul to the inner core right there to give this Lakers roster anything but props with LeBron James on it.
Yeah. So I'm going to say I'm extremely excited, right? So the Lakers are my team. They have been. It's been a painful past few years. Even last year, a lot of people thought the Lakers are going to make the playoffs, which they were on a trajectory to do, and then they sucked, right? And so I am just ecstatic about this team. I think, their roster is deep. They've got the all-stars, right? They could potentially make it out of the West and go into the NBA championships. Like you said, LeBron James, Anthony Davis are fantastic. Kyle Kuzma didn't even play in the preseason, right? So you have last year's second best scorer. There's no way he's going to be the second best scorer this year just because you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But Kyle Kuzma sort of being your third option or even fourth option, because you have Danny Green is also there. They picked up some pretty good guards, right? Quinn Cook they took from the Warriors, which, we talked about them a little bit earlier. So that's another player that they had lost. We've got Alex Caruso. I wasn't too pleased with how much Rajon Rondo I saw in the preseason, to be honest. And that's one of the things that I think will hold this team back is that there's so many guys there, right? Your Dwight Howards, LeBron Jameses, Anthony Davis, Rajon Rondos, right? Danny Greens. These are all players that are deserving just because of their status of more time. But Rajon Rondo, right? Like, I don't think he's the level that he was playing when he was back in Boston. And yet you're almost forced to play him because of his name, because of who he is, and because of the personalities on this team, even if it's not what's best for the team, right? Like, even if, let's say, an Alex Caruso or a Quinn Cook would be better in that situation for you, you're still almost forced to play Rajon Rondo, right? Or maybe you'll be forced to play a Dwight Howard over a JaVale McGee when you should go with the JaVale McGee, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this team is ultimately going to be playing a different style of basketball than the rest of the league. They're going to be playing straight up bully ball, as it's called, like they're going to be using their size, their power to dominate other teams' rosters, especially a lot of these smaller teams ran by guards, like we're talking about with the Trailblazers and Warriors. It's just going to be interesting to see. So last year's problem for them was their lack of outside shooting. And I don't really think that they did a whole lot to change that this year. I mean, I think Quinn Cook is certainly developing as a three-point shooter. I do think that I've heard good things about Caruso's outside game from what I've heard. And sure, we've seen AD step out from time to time from behind the arc and nail some. But that's not going to be where they're going to be relying on. They're going to have to get in the paint and really just wreck teams from there, which is going to be interesting to see how they incorporate Anthony Davis into that 5 role that he is so resistant of going into.
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I've heard a lot of, analysts say that the best lineup is going to be with Anthony Davis at the 5. But that's another issue, right? Is he's come out and been very outspoken that he will not play the 5 does not want to play the 5. He would prefer not to do a lot of time there. And so, like I said, leading into, a little bit earlier with all your personalities and how do you manage that is Frank Vogel, he has to balance, like you said, where do I put Anthony Davis? Is it best for my team to play him at the 5, or do I keep him at the 4, LeBron at the 3, and keep in, a JaVale McGee or Dwight Howard, right? Even though that's not the best situation, do I leave Rajon Rondo in? And so I think there's going to be a lot of those issues. The other thing that I think is going to be interesting is the point guard spot, right? Like, I don't think we have an outstanding point guard right now. And I know they've talked about LeBron James is going to run the point guard for a little bit. And I think that's probably more from an offensive thing, not so much from a defensive thing. LeBron James is not going to, he's not going to guard point guards. Like, he just can't keep up with them at his age. And so what are you going to do? Do you have Rajon Rondo, who has not been the greatest defensively? Like, he's sort of taken steps back. Alex Caruso kind of can, but he's also your lowest paid point guard on the roster, right? Quinn Cook's not very good defensively, but he's very good offensively. So, yeah, it's going to be a really interesting season for this team.
Over under 20 games for Frank Vogel.
I think he'll make it beyond that. I like what I've seen from Frank Vogel. I think he has a really good team that if he wins a championship, I'm not going to say it's because Frank is like a fantastic coach. It will be because of his team, right? Sort of like we were saying with Steve Kerr, that his team was just so good to get him a championship.
I'm just saying, if this team starts mediocre in any way, you already know what we're going to expect.
Oh, yeah. You'll be fired in an instant. And the thing is they forced Jason Kidd onto the staff. And I think the reason is as soon as Frank Vogel messes up, guess who's there, right? Boom. Jason Kidd.
I never agreed with that setup. I still don't. I think it's going to hinder this team long term. But we got to move off them. All right, let's talk about these Rockets here. So, again, away from all the other stuff earlier, how is this team going to perform on the court? We have James Harden and Russell Westbrook teaming up together, Thunder 2.0. To be honest, I don't like it. I don't like him as a 3 seed. I feel like the Rockets going after Russ felt kind of like a desperate move to me. And maybe I'm just through with watching Russell Westbrook. I have Russell Westbrook fatigue because I'm tired of hearing how this guy has triple-double, and nothing to show for it. You're going to tell me a few years ago you're going to name him the MVP because of all these triple-doubles, and then he can't play basketball the next couple of years, then maybe something's wrong with this triple-double stat, and maybe it's just a meaningless, empty-calorie stat in the NBA.
Yeah. I mean, and it very well could be, right? And I think it depends. How are you getting your triple-doubles? And a lot of people have argued that Russ, his triple-doubles are sort of fool's gold in that he'll have he'll box out his own players to get a rebound, right? Or, in some ways he forces assists on you. And so I think you're right. I think the whole triple-double machine, it's very impressive, right? Without a doubt. But at the same time, is it really contributing to actual wins, right? And something, more tangible besides your own stats. I don't know if there's evidence for that. The other thing that I have an issue with, right? If this didn't work and you had Kevin Durant on your team, like, what makes you think it's going to work now, right? Like,
oh yeah, no, this combination was entirely led by having a 7-foot freak who can shoot from anywhere on the court on your team.
mm-hmm.
Not because of these two guys and working in tandem with each other. In fact, if you remember kind of right, like James Harden was more of a reserve role when he was back out there on the OKC Thunder. So, and then it only was whenever he got to Houston that he really became this ball dominant guard like he is now. And now you're adding another ball dominant guard like Russ in there. And not just one who's so dominant, who commands the ball so frequently and often, but one who is so inefficient with the ball. It's like painful to watch Russ shoot at this point because he'll still keep throwing those threes up there and they just don't hit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, to be less than a 30% shooter from deep right now at this point in the NBA, I almost wonder if he'd be best served just to take on a Ben Simmons type role and just never shoot him because he's legit hurting his team. And the worst part, he knows he's hurting his team. There's no way that he hasn't listened to any analysis over the last couple years who said, dude, stop it. You are bad at this. And yet you keep hucking them up there just as much as any other shooter on the court.
Yeah. And I mean, I think you're exactly right, is that he's not a very good 3-point shooter. And I know that the league is going towards analysis, but like you can't force 3-point shooting on somebody that can't shoot 3-pointers. And shooting in general, I think Russ struggles with. And that's what I worry about is Russ's style of play. He relies so much on his athleticism. And he is a fantastic athlete, but similar critique to what we had with Zion, right, is that we're starting to see Russ get injured more and more, and eventually you're going to slow down. I think Russ is on the other side of 30 now. If I'm not mistaken, he might be 32.
Mm-hmm.
And so do you start to slow down? And if Russ's main thing is being athletic, now that you're old, slowing down, and injured, what value do you really have if you're not athletic and you can't shoot anymore, you know?
Yeah, I mean – and the worst part is he's going to a team that is going to put him in this position that's going to force it on him. D'Antoni's strategy is simple and easy to know. Shoot the ball. Shoot the ball. Shoot the ball from deep. Keep laying it in there. Live by the 3, die by the 3. That is D'Antoni's philosophy, and he will take it with him to the grave. And he's adding in an element to this stew that won't necessarily work. It kind of reminds me a little bit like Carmelo Anthony in New York whenever he went into D'Antoni's system. Carmelo had some of his better seasons, but it still never felt like a great fit. And I think that's what we're going to see with Russ in this combination as well.
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I have them as 3. I think they're going to get the wins during the regular season. What's really interesting, I saw a lot of like computer analysis and like modeling simulation type stuff that also have them projected. I've even seen some computer models that have them projected as high as 1. But I just don't see them being a championship caliber team.
If you told me they were the 6th seed, I would not be surprised. And if you tell me this team lost in the first round, I probably wouldn't be as shocked as most people probably would be.
Now, you know what I think is interesting, just real quick, going back to the Daryl Morey thing, is that might be their way to get rid of Daryl Morey, is to say, hey, you know, we've fallen backwards in the playoffs, right? We're now down to the 6th seed. That's why we're firing you instead of all this China
I would
stuff.
I would accept that. You can definitely fire Daryl Morey in the grounds of he went out of his way to acquire Russ in this trade, which you can argue he had to get rid of that Chris Paul contract, which you can argue he gave Chris Paul that contract. So maybe there is just some merit to fire Daryl Morey on a purely GM basis when you add those in combination with each other. All right, last team in the conference that we're going to finish up here. So the Clippers. I feel like the Clippers came in, extradited Kawhi out of Canada, and then out of nowhere come with this Paul George trade. I remember just looking on my phone. I was like, wait, what? Because it's like we didn't even know that Paul George was on the market. No one was even talking about Paul George getting traded. If anything, the Thunder, we thought they were probably just going to move off Russ somehow.
Mm-hmm.
But no, they just completely dismantle their team. And it definitely speaks to how this player mobility thing has affected the NBA, where a player under contract for a couple more years can still say, oh, I demand a trade, and just somehow end up on a different roster. Contracts in the NBA, honestly, I've come to the realization, are meaningless.
Yeah, they don't mean a whole lot in the NBA. Real quick, let me just tell you how much of a kick in the balls this whole thing was for me, right? So I think it happened at like a Friday at like a midnight Western time, right? And so unless you're on the West Coast, you're probably in bed, right? Even if you are on the West Coast, you're probably in bed. And so I wake up to my phone and, I'm a Lakers fan. And then I see, Lakers sign X, Y, and Z, like this player, that player, that player. And I knew right away, I was like, dang it, we did not get Kawhi Leonard. He must have chosen the Clippers, right? Or the Raptors, because we were holding out. And if we got Kawhi Leonard, we would have filled up our entire, cap space. So we couldn't have signed possibly all of those good players. And then I looked and I was like, Kawhi signed with the Clippers. And I was like, all right, sucks. We're going to have to whoop up on Kawhi all year. And then you have a player that the Lakers had tampered to try to get, and he signs with your rivals that share the same building with you, and they stole your best free agent. Such a kick in the balls. I was pissed. I was so upset, and I was like, the Lakers never should have waited for Kawhi. And you could argue whether or not that was a good choice, but yeah, pissed me off.
You think you're upset? Just think of all the people in Seattle who thought they were getting a team, because Steve Ballmer said if they didn't get Kawhi, they were probably going to move the franchise.
I know. Yeah. And then it screwed, on the other side, right? It's sort of screwed Toronto because they were holding out. Obviously, they thought they had a good chance at Kawhi too. But, pissed.
But when it comes to Kawhi and Toronto, that relationship is forged in blood. If you're a Toronto citizen, you can never hold anything against Kawhi. He brought your team out of the depths of just ineptitude for years. Mm-hmm. So with that said, okay, so Clippers, how far do I see this team going? The main thing that's going to be the challenge for any team that goes against this roster is you have two defensive studs with Kawhi and Paul George on this roster. Throw in Patrick Beverley, who's always been one of those like annoyances on the court, just always in your face. Like he was going after Kevin Durant hard. Granted, he gave up a 50-point game to Durant, but still, Patrick Beverley, I'll give him some props as a defender. So those three on the court at the same time are going to be a dangerous combination to have. I do worry, though. Paul George hasn't exactly been known as the most clutch player in the recent NBA history. I don't know do you think that Kawhi can take over this roster in the same way he did with Toronto and push them over the top to elevate himself even potentially over Paul George?
I think if there's a player that can do it, Kawhi's the player right now, right? Like maybe LeBron James of old, but Kawhi is good enough, I think. And like you said, they're some of the best defensive players. So I think it's going to help Paul George out a lot in that, in some of his previous roles, he's had to do all of the guarding of the best player, right, on the court. Now you can sort of flip-flop them, right? So maybe you could put Kawhi Leonard on the better player one night, then Paul George, the next night or something. Mm-hmm. So I think it's going to help. I think it will help Paul George, honestly. What I sort of worry about, though, is now that he's living in L.A., like Paul George has said, like, that's where I want to be. I want to live in L.A. I think you're right. Like, he was already unclutched. Now does he, like, not even care anymore, right? Because he's like, oh, I live in L.A. Like, I'm living my best life. This is where I'm from. Doesn't matter whether or not I get a ring. And if I play hard, like, I'm on the beach with my family. Maybe he desperately does want to get a ring still and say, hey, I still have to do it for my legacy, and this is my best shot at doing it. But yeah, I still have some questions, but I think it will be better. I think the ability for him to be a clutch player has been increased now that he's playing alongside Kawhi Leonard.
Well, a lot of people will say too they have one of the better coaches in the NBA. Personally, and this may be a little bit of a hot take thing by me, I always felt Doc Rivers may be a little bit overrated as a coach.
Even though he brought you a ring?
Yeah, but the Celtics were also one of the worst teams in the NBA the year before they established the Big Three. And I think that you could credit that championship ring more to Danny Ainge, bringing that talent together, than, Doc River basically sitting back and having that talent on his roster. Just fire him up and let him go.
Yeah, I can see that, right? Like when you have some of the best players in the world, like you just let them do their thing and you'll get you wins.
Especially too, because that was an era before big three start forming up left and right. Like the Lakers were the only real competition to the Celtics then, and clearly the Celtics dominated them when it came to that finals. It was only till, the next year when the Lakers went out there, got Gasol, and then we decided, silly enough, to trade away Kendrick Perkins, that things are getting a little interesting. I'm going on a tangent, but anyway, my point is I don't think Doc is necessarily as good as people make him out to be. Clearly, like, he lost a lot of credibility with the whole Austin Rivers thing as well. So I guess we'll see how he's able to gel this team together. Clippers are kind of an interesting team. So, like, they're not – I'm learning as I'm talking about them. In a way, they're not the most exciting to talk about how this grouping. Maybe it's just because they've always been seen as the little brother when it comes to the LA teams. So now that we have to talk about them as legitimately a number one team, I guess I got to see it before I believe it. In the same way when people keep telling me that the Knicks are one of the premier franchises in the NBA, I want to see it first before I can believe that the Clippers have really made a turnaround. Browns in the NFL too. We saw that was a much hyped, poor franchise that never really lived up to expectations.
Yeah. No, I can agree with you to some extent. Now, what I will say, though, is it's a lot easier to take one really good player in the NBA and change a franchise, right? Whereas the Browns obviously added, 3 good players and lost some depth at their line and are still really bad, right? So I think the Clippers will do a good job. I think they are lacking a little bit on their bench and depth, right? But I think they are prepared well for when they actually get to the playoffs.
I think it's just because maybe Kawhi hasn't never been one of the most vocal stars in the NBA. Paul George has never been one of the most vocal stars in the NBA, which, hey, they're great players. That's all you need. You don't need a guy who's loud and in your face and making terrible China comments like LeBron James.
All right. We'll leave it there.
We'll leave it there. I think it's time that we move into a different subject. You guys have heard us talk the West to death just now. So now let's move into something a little bit more fun, something a little bit off the beaten path. So springtime football, version 1000. The XFL Draft happened this year. Well, version 2 of the XFL alone. So literally we've worked to a point in history where we've literally come full circle and concepts that are long dead are coming back into the mainstream. So they had their draft recently. Multiple rounds, and we're not going to go too far into it. I think the main thing when you talk about these like lower level like football leagues, a lot of times it's easier to focus on the quarterbacks. So I just kind of want to mention a few interesting names that were out there. So Landry Jones, he got former Steelers quarterback, former Oklahoma quarterback. He's now with the Dallas Renegades. Matt McGloin as a New York Guardian. DC Defenders drafted Cardale Jones, former Ohio State quarterback. Tampa Bay Vipers. Houston Roughnecks. Seattle Dragons. Los Angeles Wildcats. St. Louis Battlehawks. Wherever the hell a Battlehawk is. These are some interesting-ass names coming out of the XFL, honestly. You could definitely tell Vince McMahon had his name in naming these teams.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think I've really mentioned the main ones that kind of stand out. On the road, you had like Luis Perez, who played for the AAF. You're seeing a lot of AAF retread names come into this listing. It's just going to be interesting. Can this league last longer than 3 weeks?
Honestly, it just seems so gimmicky to me, right? Like with a lot of the things that McMahon does, like it just seems so gimmicky. And it's also all of your guys that couldn't cut it in the NFL. So I think this league is going to be hard. The NFL, they just sort of have a monopoly, right, on football. And then if you want maybe football that's not as high level, then there's the NCAA, right? And there's not a whole lot of other options in that. I just think the XFL, like, is it occasionally fun to watch, right? And is there occasionally, something funny that comes out, or you're like, hey, that was actually a good play? Yeah. I just think it's a gimmick, though.
Here's what I thought about the XFL. So when Vince McMahon came out on an ESPN interview and randomly publicly announced that he was going to bring it back, I thought to myself, okay, is it going to be back like next year? Or when is it starting up? Because it seemed like they were trying to capitalize on the whole kneeling issue in the NFL, a lot of the domestic violence issues that were happening in the NFL. And they waited. I mean, I guess in fairness, starting up a football league isn't exactly the most easy thing to do on a whim. And that's probably what killed them when they first started it, the first iteration of the XFL. Mm-hmm. But I feel like all the momentum for it was lost because he made that announcement and then I didn't hear anything from the XFL for a good long while. Now, I will say this. There is something to these guys who just have a chip on their shoulder, who just never let things die, like a Vince McMahon, someone who just really the XFL, he will longly say, is his greatest failure as like an entrepreneur. I think he wants to make this work. And what I will say, as far as you mentioned, the monopoly on football that NFL has, when the AIF first came out, that first week, they were pulling down some decent ratings. It wasn't a completely lost thing. However, many of those viewers were there just mostly to see kind of, there's springtime football. Mm-hmm. Like maybe just out of curiosity. Week to week, you could have to tell those numbers fell off. I was so disappointed. There was a franchise in San Antonio. I was legit going to watch a game, and then just out of nowhere, hey, league shut down. Bye, guys. General rule of life, if you're going to start a business, you should probably have enough money to pay your employees.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like that's a major issue if you cannot pay the people that you need to keep employed to provide your product. I think with the amount of money, though, that McMahon can probably, has access to and can generate, like, I don't know if that would necessarily be the issue, but I do think viewership is going to be a little iffy.
Well, they're going to have to do like creative things. And I will say this. I don't know if you ever got the chance to watch the original or the 30 for 30 on the XFL, why it failed the kind of first time. But they did a lot of things that did get a lot of publicity and the NFL even still uses today. So, for example, the Skycam, that was originally created by the XFL. And obviously you see the Skycam in the NFL to this day. It's one of the most popular like camera angles they have. Mm-hmm. And I think it's going to be up to the XFL to create something different while keeping the rules relatively the same. I liked a lot of things the AAF was doing, like rather than doing the onside kick, which I feel is kind of a waste of time. Honestly, only happens like once every 1,000 attempts, I believe. Mm-hmm. They did like, okay, well, what about like a 4th and 20 from the goal line? I thought that was a cool idea. They have to come up with creative things here. They have to go a little bit off the beaten path, maybe stream their games on YouTube or some other new age thing, like stream their games on Facebook, maybe utilize social media to their advantage. You have to pursue viewers. Viewers aren't going to pursue the XFL, I think, in the same way.
No, I think you're exactly right. From a business perspective, they have to find some good way to differentiate themselves from the NFL, right? And even if that means you got to try something and take a big risk, right, that you're not sure how it's going to work out, I think it's what you got to do. It's what you got to try. My biggest thing is a lot of these guys, though, they're talented, right? Like Landry Jones was one of the best Oklahoma quarterbacks and one of the best New Mexico quarterbacks. But like we could just tell that he just wasn't that talented when it came to being, at the elite level, right? And so now all your teams are made up of those talents that couldn't make it in the NFL.
Yeah. So I just want to mention the XFL draft because I am interested to see it. I will watch a game or two. And if I even get a chance to go see the Houston Roughnecks who are in my backyard, I definitely will take advantage. I got to say, I was disappointed. I thought there's a part of me that thought, is Albuquerque going to pull down one of these franchises?
It would have been fun. I mean, I think Albuquerque needs something to do. I don't know if that'll ever happen. We do have New Mexico United, though, and I'm going to a game tonight, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, okay.
XFL, I don't know if we're even a big enough market for the XFL.
Well, I was disappointed that they mostly put their teams in NFL cities here. So Dallas, New York, D.C., Tampa Bay, Houston, Seattle. The only market on here that they didn't put was St. Louis, which kudos St. Louis. You lost the NFL team, but you got an XFL team, so good for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who really wins that trade, right? LA or St. Louis.
Well, clearly Stan Kroenke has an opinion on it. He's just raking in the money. Apparently the Rams have a different bank account than everyone else.
Really?
Well,
I'm not surprised. I mean,
it shows with their boldness in making a Jalen Ramsey trade.
yeah.
But last thing I want to say before the XFL, before we move on to the next topic, obviously never forget where you come from. I want to give a shout out to all our New Mexico-based players that did get drafted by this league. Let's see, we have offensive tackle Avery Jordan, former UNM product, former UNM running back Jarrell Presley, and NMSU product Larry Rose III are both going to the Los Angeles-based franchise. Never mind. Larry Rose is going to the LA Wildcats, and then Presley will be going to the DC Defenders. So represent us well, boys. I want to see how you guys do. I'm hoping for your continued success in the XFL, and hopefully for you guys, maybe this is an opportunity for you guys to get back in the NFL. Larry, I enjoyed watching you at NMSU, and I thought you were one of the most fun Aggies I ever got the chance to see, even despite, obviously, hey, let's both be honest about this, the team wasn't that good.
Yeah. Neither of our teams are very good here in New Mexico, but we still always show them love and support. And anybody that's an alumni from there, right? We 100% support you.
Get paid like Pascal. Woo, woo. All right. So I actually did want to tie this into another Vince McMahon topic, in particular with his ability to manage to swoop up these UFC talents. I thought this would be an interesting discussion for yourself too. I mean, from a standpoint, you obviously love to watch the UFC. You love to watch these guys actually compete, real fights, so to say, and yet they keep bailing on the UFC for the WWE. So Cain Velasquez is the latest person to jump ship, one of the more talented heavyweights in UFC history. Let's see, he's got a match against Tyson Fury, came out of nowhere to fight Brock Lesnar too at points. I did kind of find it weird that Cain was bouncing around the Mexican leagues for years, or for the last couple months at least, because why is he doing that? Like, if you were Cain Velasquez and you have a big name appeal, why aren't you jumping into WWE? And here he is. He's made his debut. This follows a long string of fighters. Ronda Rousey, one of the more notable ones. Brock Lesnar, I mean, granted, he started off in the WWE, jumped out of it, became an NFL player, became a UFC fighter, and then ended up back in the WWE, then UFC. Kind of a bit of a hodgepodge there for Brock. Bobby Lashley started off in the WWE, went to the UFC. Same goes for CM Punk. Two different kinds of results. CM Punk, I've seen him get punked enough in his UFC fights. And then, of course, everyone's looking at Conor McGregor right now because, obviously, we talked about it before in the show. We assume his fighting career is kind of in limbo right now, especially if he can't get that fight he wants against, like, a Khabib. Could he be the next one to jump ship?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot in there. Going back to the Cain Velasquez thing first, I think it was actually smart for him to do the Mexican leagues just because he's always he has the Mexican flag when he goes out in his fights, right? He had a huge following from Mexico. So I think that might have been their way of hey, let's build this international audience. And then when he comes over to the WWE, right, he brings in the international viewers along with some of our WWE viewers. So I thought it was actually kind of interesting. I'm not too surprised that Cain went that way just because of his ties to Mexico and having such Mexican pride. As far as the McGregor thing, I hear that he actually was just charged with another sexual assault in Ireland. So he might not even have the chance to fight in the WWE or wrestle or whatever you want to call it in the WWE, right? So we might never see him again in either league, UFC or the WWE. So hopefully that guy can get it together. But if anything, I think the WWE is where he might eventually go just because you make so much money there, right? And a lot of these guys, so the average pay, what I will say for a WWE wrestler, right, is between $500K and $1 million annually. Now, granted, there's a lot less of them, so that's why they get a bigger, slice of the pie, right, compared to UFC fighters. And a lot of people know their names and all that. But if you're a really popular UFC fighter, you have a huge following, I think it just makes sense to go to the WWE, especially when your average UFC fighter only really makes $132,000 per year. And that number has actually declined since 2015, 2016 even. And so not only that, but the numbers are a little bit skewed for your top earners. So only 31% of UFC fighters in 2017 anyways made six figures. And so most of these UFC fighters are not even making six figures, yet they still have to pay their coaches, nutritionists. A lot of these guys have other gym memberships. So not only do they go to their fighting gym, but then they go to an actual gym where they lift and run and swim and stuff like that. They have to cover their own health insurance, right? The UFC, I don't think, provides them health insurance.
Well, I'll counter that a little bit. You can say the WWE also has a similar situation right now. Most of their guys are independent contractors. Yeah. So they also have to deal with that as well, as maybe just a thing of this genre of sport that they both are kind of like involved in.
Yeah, it's definitely different from your team sport dynamic, right? Where your team sport, your team covers all of your facilities. They cover all of your coaches and all of that stuff. But I mean, the big difference though, being the pay, when you have to pay for that and you have $500,000, it's easy to pay an annual gym membership and your coaches and nutritionists. When you're only making $75,000 a year, right? And 30 of that has to go to your coaches, nutritionists, gym, all that stuff, health insurance. Like then you're only walking out with $40,000, which is really only like maybe $10,000 after every single fight goes into your pocket.
What I will say though, and this is kind of maybe a reason in terms of the pay scale with the WWE, these guys are on the road a ton. They're constantly in hotel beds. They're constantly having to go like from city to city, and they perform anywhere from 5 to 7 times a week sometimes. Whereas, obviously you only have to fight like maybe a handful of times a year.
Yeah, most guys, I would say on average will fight anywhere in the 3 to 4 fight range, right? Like if you're getting to 5 or 6, that's a lot, really frequent. And then if you're down at 1 or 2, that's not a whole lot, right? So most fighters, I think, tend to fight around the 3 to 4 range.
Yeah, so like Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, I'm sure Cain Velasquez, they got sweetheart deals when it came to them having to go on the road and compete like these lower-end WWE performers. Relatively, I don't know if it's necessarily a lucrative route for the lower spectrum guys of the UFC. Mm-hmm. Perhaps, though, the really only opportunity I see for those type of performers is if you're already considered amongst the top tier of UFC. Like, for example, if a Nate Diaz decided he wanted to jump ship from the UFC over to the WWE, he's already been described as a needle mover by Dana White. He'd have an opportunity to earn one of those deals where maybe he only has to work a few pay-per-views a year. He'd have to only go on the road like a few times for appearances, but he'd be fine. Now, from a health perspective, I think you're onto something there saying and why this is probably a more beneficial route for these guys in terms of where they want to go. Obviously, taking real punches in a fight is going to mess you up a lot more long-term. But a lot of these guys in the WWE also do have like bodies that are pasted together with staples and chewing gum because so it's interesting from a long-term health perspective, which is better to go to be a UFC fighter in real fights, but you fight less in a year, or to be a WWE performer, you perform at least 5 times in a week, add in all the extra travel, and a lot of these guys fall into bad drug habits as well, just given obviously the opioid crisis being what it is in America today.
I think you're right, but I think they're almost two different sort of health concerns. So the WWE, I've heard, is really tough on your body, and I'm talking more like your joints and just your soft tissue as far as like muscle and stuff like that, right? Like you're getting bruised, you're getting banged up. There is even the occasional like broken bones that'll happen, right? And like everybody knows that I think the stunts are fake. Sorry if you didn't know that, right? Don't want to ruin your
what? Trey.
I'm sorry to ruin
and I was going to take you to WrestleMania.
So I'll tell you a funny story when I'm done with my point, right? Because I don't want to lose my point. So I think the WWE is really, really tough physically on your body, but you also protect your head and your mental well-being, right? Like I would seriously doubt that you're getting as many concussions as when you're taking punches. You're legit getting knocked out.
I will say this though. So I hate to invoke his name in this situation. Chris Benoit, 2007. If you're unfamiliar with what happened in those events, he took his own life, but not before he took the lives of his son and his wife. And this was one of the bigger like turning points in the CTE discussion because when they actually analyzed the brain of Chris Benoit, they said it was similar to that of 90-year-old Alzheimer patients.
Really?
I guess this is similar to any sport, any athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone's bodies function differently, and taking head injuries could be a lot based in your genetics and if you're a lot predisposed to those type of injuries.
Mm-hmm.
And he has just as much head damage as probably an MMA performer in recent years, or even NFL star.
Yeah, that is interesting. So I didn't know that. I mean, I guess from just the outside looks, it doesn't look like they're taking that many blows to the head, but there's the possibility that they are. And the other thing, because it's an act, right? Like the ref, at least to my knowledge, doesn't like stop in and like, hey, this guy has a concussion, we're stopping it right here, right? Like, or they're out, they dropped on their feet, I'm going to end the fight right then and there. And so I think almost because it is an act, if there is a concussion, right, it's a lot harder to notice and it's a lot harder to stop.
Yeah, I mean, most of the times they have their signals like anything to say like, hey, this guy's legit hurt, we need to get someone out here. Sometimes they can play it off as part of the performance like that. But a lot of times too, because these guys also, as independent contractors, they could be cut on a whim. A lot of times they'll do something like hide injuries, which can be just as dangerous to your long-term health as anything else, and is why maybe you even have a horrible case like a Chris Benoit, and the horrible death rate in the WWE in terms of their performers. You have seen way too many of these guys not make it past 50, just based off everything they did. It's gotten a little bit better, but we're still seeing a lot of guys die well before they should.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think sort of to put a bow on this, it's sad both ways, right? Like I think your body is at risk going both professions, but if you are a top tier guy and you do have a big following, WWE is the way I think we'll start to see a lot of people go, just because, I mean, you're getting banged up in both, right? But you get a lot bigger of a payday. It sucks you're on the road a little bit more, but when you can make $1 million instead of, 200,000, I think that's the way to go.
I think that's just the sacrifices that come with a job that pays that high, right?
Yeah, exactly. Real quick, so my funny WWE story. I know we got to start wrapping things up.
Yes.
So we have this junior wrestler that I coach. So I'm a youth wrestling coach. I coach kids all the way from 5 to 15, and he's one of my 15 and unders, right? So he's like 13, 14, and he loves wrestling. The reason why he got into like scholastic wrestling and the type of wrestling that we do is because he would always watch like Mexican luchadores, right? And so he came in and he was wearing his luchador mask on like his first practice or like to registration. He's like, I'm ready to wrestle. And we're like, hey, bro, like this is not that type of wrestling. And so he's come a very long way. He's very good. But I'm on this road trip with some of the high schoolers, right? So we took our high school program and our youth program, and we're going out to this tournament. We're out in Arizona. And I try to have like deeper conversations with the kids. Like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Like, what are your long-term goals? And, one of my kids is like, hey, I think I want to be an engineer, right? Like, okay. One of my kids is like, hey, I want to be, a police officer or whatever it is, right? And some of them, I don't know what I want to be. And then you get Kane, and he's like, I want to be the world champ in the WWE. and we all start cracking up laughing because we're like, okay, that makes sense. That's Kane. And, one of the high schoolers is laughing, and he's like, no, Kane, really, what do you want to do? And Kane's like, I want to be the world champ in the WWE. And he's like, bro, that's fake, right? And the poor kid, 14 years old, just starts bawling his eyes out. He had no idea that the WWE was fake. And he's like, Daniel, you crushed my dreams. Like, that's what I've always wanted to be. And it was the funniest thing. I mean, poor dude. He's got to learn eventually, but I felt bad for him.
Well, hey, I'll say this, and it's almost perfect that his name is Kane. Keep doing it. Don't let that be what turns you away. If that's legit your dream, I actually still want to see you go out there and do it. Hey, many people want to be actors when they grow up. I think that's just an extension of being an actor, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's acting.
Even if it's fake, if it's real to you, go out there, perform, work your ass off, and you can maybe make it in there.
Oh, yeah. And the last thing I'll say about Kane is just to tell you how much passion this kid has about WWE wrestling. He built his own wrestling ring around his trampoline in his front yard. guard
Dang.
so that he could throw his brother on the trampoline and jump off the ropes and not like kill themselves. It's so funny.
That's impressive. Hey, that actually shows he's dedicated.
Oh
So,
yeah, no, I love him. I hope he makes it.
yeah, good for him, man. Keep working. I want to see it. Hey, Kurt Angle got his start in being a actual wrestler. So hey, maybe you can learn from Andre, learn from the best, and maybe you'll be there one day.
I'm sure he will, and then he could, maybe help me out with $500,000 or something.
Okay. So we gotta start closing up. We got a couple topics that we got to hit on first. So I'm just going to go real quick into a little caveat about the baseball playoffs where we're kind of standing out right now. Last week, we both said the Nationals, so we're right on that regard. And right now, the ALCS is still ongoing. The Astros have a 3-2 lead over the Yankees. Game 6 plays tonight. You are hearing this podcast probably on a Sunday, so maybe the Astros pulled it down. Maybe we're going into Game 7. Either way, Tuesday will be World Series time, and the Nationals will be right there. They are the second and last team to finally bust the slump and get their way into the World Series. Now, Mariners fans, you stand alone. Only franchise not to make a World Series. One of the interesting things I will note from my Instagram page, so I posted a meme regarding the Mariners fans. I posted a meme earlier in the day regarding the Dolphins. And it was interesting to see who was the most self-deprecating franchise because both those posts were our most popular Instagram posts in Slumpbuster history. So congratulations, Mariners and Dolphins fans. You two are competing for the most self-hate of any franchise.
So what you're saying is our fans only like when we talk about the crappy teams, so they don't even care about the good teams.
Oh, yeah. Dysfunction absolutely draws. Congratulations, Mariners. Congratulations, Dolphins. You are the cream of the crop between your two respective sports. But congratulations to the Nationals. You earned it. It couldn't have been easy when, again, your franchise star, Bryce Harper, decides to spurn you, go to a division rival, and you managed to get to the World Series without him. That is so impressive. Hats off to you. The moment must have been, as they say, Bryceless.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Juju. You don't even have kids.
I might have kids. We don't know.
Yeah, crazy college times. Yeah, what I will say, imagine how much it's going to hurt Bryce Harper if they do win the World Series. Oh my gosh, that would be awful. Literally, you're the team's best player, you're their star, you leave, and they win it as soon as you're gone. That's got to hurt.
Yeah, well, hey, he has 12 years to figure it out in Philadelphia. Good luck with that contract.
Yeah.
Anyway, regarding the Nationals, whoever comes out of the ALCS, a lot of people aren't giving the Nationals a chance against them, whether it be the Astros, whether it be the Yankees.
Mm-hmm.
They have a rotation that consists of Steven Strasburg, Max Scherzer. Patrick Corbin isn't no slouch. This team is going to be a tough, gritty team to get out of the World Series, whether you're the Yankees or the Astros. So I think it's important that a lot of fans don't sleep on them. Since we kind of have to cheat and give our predictions for both teams, regardless of who comes out of the ALCS, I'm going to say it's a 6-game series. That's just going to be my early prediction there. Regarding the ALCS, so who are the Nationals going to face? Right now, it's already announced Brad Peacock is going to be the starter in Game 6. And if it goes to a Game 7, the Astros will throw out Garrett Cole. So it's a little bit of a bold strategy for the Astros to sit on your best player, your best pitcher, if a Game 7 happens. Do you agree with that strategy of saving Garrett Cole till Game 7? Or would you just want to end it against the Yankees right now?
I would personally rather just put him away. In my opinion, when you start getting to Game 7s, right, now that's just more opportunity for something weird to happen. And so, even if he is your best pitcher, right, or in any sport, your best player, and you're in a Game 7, there's times where your best player can be off or the other team just happens to be on. And so I wouldn't want to take that much chance. I would rather just put him in early rather than wait till Game 7. I'd try to put it away.
Yeah, and I think, too, it's worth stating, I have noticed a trend in the past when it comes to these hot teams in the playoffs, like the Nationals, who come out of nowhere to win games. It's going to be interesting to see how they bounce back with the added rest compared to the other teams. So they're going to be able to throw out Max Scherzer in game 1. So they're going to have their ace on the mound. So if you are the Astros, it's a little bit of strategy to the point where, okay, so if we do manage to put the Yankees away in game 6 without Cole, great. We can throw out Scherzer versus Cole. Game 1, 2 solid pitchers on the mound. Game 1 is going to be pivotal. Is pivotal in any championship series, especially in the sport of baseball, where if I'm not mistaken, and I've only seen this quote a few times, but the winner of game 1 in the World Series has like an 80% win clip. So you need to pull it down. And I think that there is something to saying you want to save Garrett Cole, but will it come back to backfire? I guess we won't really know by the time that we record this podcast next. By the time we're next recording, we'll at least be game 3 deep into the World Series.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's a bold strategy. To me, I don't pull any punches, though, when it's getting close to making it into a World Series. I just go for it and go for the kill no matter what.
Just end it, especially since you're going to be in game 6, Houston. You got your crowd behind you. Mm-hmm. This is the time to strike because the Yankees, if there's one thing they do well, hit it out of that ballpark. And teams that hit home runs can manage to pull games out of their ass sometimes because your pitcher can make a perfect pitch outside corner, and suddenly it's in the Crawford boxes, and momentum is gone. You have lost that game. So you're right. It's tight. You probably want to throw your best guy out there. Okay, one last note I want to close on before we end the baseball discussion. Just to epitomize how dominant the Nationals were, though, in that 4-game sweep of the Cardinals. So the Cardinals never had a lead in that series. Impressive. Their batters, they batted a combined 130. 130. That's ridiculous. So even if you take their on-base plus slugging percentage, they were only combined for a 374 clip, which is the lowest since the 1982 Atlanta Braves at 399. A well-rested staff. Good luck for the Astros, Yankees, whoever you are, because this Nationals team is coming to bring a title back to D.C. And considering that this fan base has to watch the Redskins each and every week, boy, do they need it.
I know. That's got to be our next post is a Redskins post and see how many likes we get.
Honestly, there is something to these teams that hate their own franchises. I get it. As a Niners fan, I had my own drinking game for years. Basically, if the Niners find a new way to disappoint me, take a shot. If they find a new way to make me cry, take 2.
Yeah. No, I'm excited for the World Series. I think the Nationals are good. I think I'm personally still rooting for the Astros to win it all, but I think it'll be a good competitive World Series, though.
And I think that just shows that even in any sports postseason managed to bring down viewers, even for a casual fan. I know Andre is going to actually be watching these World Series games. I know it's just one of those things. You have to make it through the regular season, but the postseason baseball has such a unique feeling that a lot of sports can't really capture. The fact that we can say that a team like the Nationals upset teams they should have not beat and are standing here, you cannot say that about the NBA playoffs. Come on. When's the last time an 8 seed has even gone past the first round? Ever?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very much, right? Like there's usually the 1 or 2 teams that are going to make it to the championship and they're going to win it. Right?
And the last team in the NFL that was able to move from the wild card round all the way into the Super Bowl was in 2012. So baseball is so unique in that aspect of it. I got to say, I really love that factor that an underdog could jump into the championship round. All right, let's get into NFL Week 7. It's time. We got to make these predictions. I got to beat you another week.
This past week, honestly, was awful for me, where I thought I didn't get a single one right. But
I did the math. Honestly, I was just as bad as you. It just, on the ones we disagreed with, we kind of tied. So it kind of washed last week for us, to be honest.
Okay, yeah, last week was a rough week. I was looking at my picks and I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the worst week I've ever had in picking sports. But
well, as far as the Thursday night game, so that's the big headline of the week right now that might even overshadow the Sunday games. Kansas City, they won the game 30-6, but they lost so much more. So it's going to be interesting to see how they come out in our power rankings after this. So Patrick Mahomes on a routine quarterback sneak gets hurt. So it's a dislocated kneecap officially. He's going to miss about roughly 3 to 4 weeks is the word out there on the streets. I don't know. Maybe he could go to Wakanda. I know Saquon Barkley knows a guy.
But, yeah, that might be how Saquon Barkley is able to get in so quickly. That's impressive.
But a lot of people are crushing Andy Reid for his decision to do Patrick Mahomes on a quarterback sneak, even with like injured ankle. Stop it, please. How many times have you ever seen a quarterback get hurt on a quarterback sneak? It doesn't happen. So why are we crushing Andy Reid for doing this? Tom Brady has been doing quarterback sneaks for the last 20 years. Are we going to believe that a dynamic athlete like Patrick Mahomes can't push behind the offensive center for 2 feet? I mean, come on. Like, I think it's ridiculous to give Andy Reid as much flack as people are doing with this. Quarterback sneak is, honestly, I feel like one of the more safer plays because you don't ever see injuries from it. This is a complete freak injury.
Yeah, I agree on that. And an ankle injury is not as bad as, like, the Kevin Durant injury last year, right? Like, a lot of people had thought that it was like an Achilles, and they thought his Achilles might tear if he went back in. With this, I don't think that anybody was really thinking that there could have been potentially long-term damage, right? And it's not like he was in a gigantic knee brace or anything like that, or people were worried about a ligament tearing. It just is a freak accident. And Pat Mahomes, he knew that going in, and that football is a game, right? That you risk possible injury, and it just happened.
With that said, if you're the Chiefs, you're put in this position, though, not having him for 3-4 weeks. What's that going to do for you? You're having to depend on Matt Moore. I think that Andy Reid is a good enough coach where they can pull down at least if they go 1-2, I think that's okay. But it's definitely going to hurt you in terms of seeding because Houston's rocking right now. They just beat you, so they're going to have tiebreaker on you. And clearly you're not going to catch the Patriots with Mahomes gone. And I just mentioned that stat a little bit ago. No team has made out of the wild card round all the way to the Super Bowl since 2012. So clearly those buys matter. Do you think the Chiefs are still a Super Bowl caliber team now?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit tough. And they just haven't looked good recently either. Like, they look good in their win against the Broncos, but the Broncos also are not the best team this year. The Broncos have looked better as of late. They looked really bad against the Chiefs. But I don't know. And you're right. Being in that spot where now you have to play in that wild card week can be really detrimental. I'm a little bit worried. I had them going to the Super Bowl, I think, or at least, being one of the top contenders for it. I don't know if I feel comfortable putting them there anymore, especially with this injury to Mahomes.
Packers, Vikings, Titans. That's their next 3 weeks. So it's not an easy schedule either. If you told me they managed to pull off one win against the Vikings or the Packers, maybe it's still doable to get that bye week because I could see the Texans losing a game or two. In fact, I could see them losing a game this week against the Colts, who are also competing for the division as well. But this is a terrible timing, honestly, for this injury. Terrible timing anyway. You never want to see your star quarterback go out, especially in a meaningless game against Denver. But, God, I mean, we both picked the Chiefs to win, so the game is kind of irrelevant at this point to us, except for this one injury is standing out right now. I don't know.
Yeah, and those teams, they have tough defenses, right? And so now the Chiefs' offense, the Chiefs have been notorious for being able to win games because their offense has been so outstanding. But now you got, who is it, Matt Moore, you said?
Matt Moore, their quarterback, yeah.
Yeah, as their backup quarterback. And so now you're going up against some tough defenses, and your offense isn't as good as it has been to win you your games, right? Like, good luck on this stretch.
Yeah, I mean, Matt Moore is not great, but he's better than less.
Yeah. More is usually better than less.
Got you again. Twice now. Dad jokes.
All right, let's just get into the pick.
Okay, gotcha. All righty. So let's move into the games. Sunday morning is starting off with that was perfect, pristine, amazing, top 5 defense in the NFL, San Francisco 49ers, traveling into our nation's capital. Self-hating Redskins fans, join with me. 10-point line, Niners. Give me the Niners. Give me the points. Come on. Let's be real, Drake. Can you really pick against them this week?
I think So I also thought about this. I think I've picked against your Niners almost every single week, if not every single week, right? Like I know I picked against them in the Steelers game. I know I picked against them last week. I'm pretty sure I picked against them all the other times they played, but I'm not picking against them this week. They look good. Like I had questions about them. What teams had they really played, even when they played the Steelers, right? We had a backup quarterback in, but they look good. And the Redskins don't, right? So
Yeah, I mean, this is a Kyle Shanahan hate game. Redskins fans, you think you hate your team? Kyle Shanahan has been on record this week saying he hates them 10 times as much. When asked about it, he came out to quote, "What did you like about your time in Washington?" "Oh, you know, the players, everything." "What else did you like?" "Oh, nothing else." So, you know, we'll see how this game goes. Well, we know how this game will go. Mm-hmm. Niners, 6-0. Woo, woo. All right. Next game up. Rams, Falcons. The Falcons are liquid hot garbage. The Rams picked up Jalen Ramsey. We kind of ignored it. We didn't talk about it as much in the news headlines. Jalen Ramsey is a Ram. Marcus Peters, gone. What are you going to make of this situation? Do you think that this will be good for the Rams? I mean, 3-3, 3 straight losses. I don't know if they can really win the division anymore. So I don't know if this was a wise trade to trade away your first-round pick for the next 2 years.
I don't know. And I don't know if it makes that big of a difference for them. I mean, they've had a lot of offensive struggles, too. They haven't looked that great offensively. I know their defense isn't as good as it was last year. But, I mean, I like Jalen Ramsey. But you're right. The timing's just a little bit weird. And to give up that much of a haul for him, I think they overpaid a little bit.
If you told me they beat the Niners, I could see it a little bit more. Or if you told me they beat the Seahawks. But having lost back-to-back games against both those teams, and they still have to play the Niners on the road. They still have to play one more game against Seattle as well. I don't know if Jalen Ramsey is a big enough difference maker for them. And it brings up some interesting cap questions for this team long-term, whether or not they're going to be able to pay all these guys. I mean, I joke that it seems like they have a different bank account, but there still is a hard cap, I think, in the NFL somehow. I mean, I don't know how you're managed to pay Aaron Donald, Todd Gurley, Jared Goff. You're going to have to pay Jalen Ramsey, even if he says he's playing on that 5th-year option next year. It's still going to come around where he's going to want to break out the Brinks truck. Same argument he had with Tom Coughlin.
Yeah, and they're stuck with that Gurley contract. I mean, that's really been what's limited them, is that they're not getting the value out of it that they thought they were going to get out of it.
They're still paying Brandon Cooks big money, and then there's going to be a point where you're going to talk about Cooper Kupp. When's he going to get paid? There's going to be a point where you're going to talk about Robert Woods, who's just as much a big part of your offense as well. This team is going to be really hard to pay given the current cap structure. Where are they going to make concessions? Jared Goff, you're tied to him long term. Make or break, and he has looked pretty bad. But with that said, going back into the game, no one looks bad against the Falcons. This defense, oh my God. They're so bad. So bad. Like, Kyler Murray destroyed them. The week before, they just got absolutely decimated by the Texans. Basically, if you need a get-right game, Falcons are the team for you. Go ahead and give me the Rams in this game by a wide margin.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think the Rams, if you need a bounce-back game, this is the game to do it. And the Falcons, for whatever reason, are just really bad this year. They're just very bad.
I've given up on them. They're all the way down at, like, I think for me, 29.
Yeah. And I don't blame you.
All right. So the biggest line of the week, hands down, is going to be Miami Dolphins going into Buffalo this week. 17-point dogs. Miami, they're going to be throwing out Ryan Fitzpatrick this week. Josh Rosen gets jerked around again. Now he's on the bench. Ryan Fitzpatrick led a little bit of a comeback last week against Washington. No one really won Tank Bowl. Let's be honest about that. I thought that the Dolphins were being smart and throwing out Rosen, but what are they doing throwing out Fitzpatrick for another week? I got to go with the Vegas here on this one too. Give me the Bills, but I don't know if they're going to honestly go to the 17-point line just because the Bills aren't an offensive powerhouse. They're not a juggernaut by any means. They're going to win by defense. This might be a blowout, but a blowout like 20-7.
Yeah. Nope. I totally agree. I'm going with the Bills, and I think it's going to be an easy win for them. I don't think they're going to struggle with the Dolphins. Especially now that the Dolphins are the worst team in the NFL, right? Like, you're guaranteeing yourself you're going to be able to get one of the top quarterbacks in this year's drafts. So I don't even think the Dolphins want to try to win against the Bills.
The flip side of the Jalen Ramsey trade in our next game is going to be the Jaguars are going on to Cincinnati this week. Minshew Mania has hit a bit of a roadblock right now. It's not nearly the hype it was a few weeks ago. Nick Foles is back out there. He's apparently getting ready to practice right now. So, hey, I think, unfortunately, it's a bit of an end in that little saga of Jaguars history. It was fun while it lasted, but do I think that this is a spot where the Bengals might get their first win at home, 4.5-point dogs? Nah, I'm going to go with the Jags.
Man, you know what? Just to be different, I'll take the Bengals.
You'll go with the Bengals?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, my picks suck anyways, so I'll go with the Bengals.
Okay,
at least
so
last week they did.
You're going to basically take the George Costanza approach that if every instinct you have is wrong, just do the opposite.
Exactly. Eventually, I'm going to get it right.
All right. This next game here, Lions absolutely 100% got screwed in their last game Monday night. Like, Jesus Christ, that was terrible. Like, the guy wasn't even in the face mask. Like, how do you, if you're an NFL rep and the guy has all shoulder pad, where do you see face mask? Twice. Mm-hmm. Twice on pivotal drives. I do believe that this Lions team is good. I do believe they're a solid team. I don't know if I'm necessarily as bullish to give them a top 10 standing as you, but that is so crippling. They literally had a chance to be the number one team in the NFC North, and they got screwed by the referees. What the hell?
Yeah, I think they're coming out with a vengeance. And that's the thing. I knew this Lions team, we had been saying it all year long, right? Is we thought they were sneaky good. Now I think it's not so much sneaky good as they're like good and getting screwed by refs, right? Like they competed with the Chiefs. They probably should have won that game last week. I think the Lions are actually good, and I think they're going to beat the Vikings.
I am kind of worried about this one because coming off such a heartbreaking loss like that, can they really bounce back mentally? I mean, things like that tend to have a snowball effect when you're a team like the Lions, who are an up-and-coming team. When you get wins literally taken out of the win column by outside forces like a referee like that, it has a mental effect. I mean, look at the Saints. The Saints have had that in the back of their head the entire year, the last 2 years, having these crippling losses. I don't know if the Lions can necessarily bounce back. I'm actually going to go with Minnesota because you know what? The Lions are 2-2, meaning they're a 500 team, meaning they're not over that 500 mark threshold. So Kirk Cousins has a chance to succeed here. So go ahead and give me the Vikings at 2.5 points favorite.
His superpowers magically turn on when you're at 500.
It's like the bat signal, except it's like a decimal and 500 lights up instead of the bat.
It's so funny. We'll have to make like a meme or a comment about that.
How many
like
Kirk Cousins contracts could buy you a bat signal?
I would think that the bat signals are pretty cheap. I don't know. I don't know how high powered, but maybe we'll say half
a Kirk Cousins contract. Okay, fair enough.
I think so. I think that's good.
All right, next game up. Knock on wood if you're with me, if you're excited about this one. The Raiders, back from a bye week, back from London, are on the road again because they're just the NFL's nomadic franchise to face the Packers for the first time since their 80-yard Winnipeg Bowl during the preseason. This is an interesting one. So the Packers are 5-point favorites in this one at home in Lambeau, but they did come off a short week Monday night where they should have lost. We just acknowledged they should have lost that game. Give me the Raiders. I'm going to go with the upset here. Raiders are somehow going to be 4-2, and once again, I'm going to be lost on what to do with them in my power rankings.
Yeah, apparently the Raiders are a sneaky good team this year too. That neither of us saw that happening.
They might win the AFC West right now.
Which would be insane. Like, I could not imagine that. And apparently everybody would call Gruden a genius or something, right? Like, to come in and be able to do that, like, would be unheard of. That being said, I think the Packers are just too talented, too good. They're playing at home. Give me the Packers.
Okay. Let me go ahead. So this one, Vegas had this at one point at an even line. It's since moved in the Colts' favors. The points currently have the Colts as a 1-point favorite at home against the Texans. It's a bit of a toss-up game. I could go either way on this one myself. Dre, do you want to go ahead and give your choice?
I'll go with the Colts, though I'm not confident. I can definitely see it. Like you said, I would not be surprised if the Texans win this one.
I'm going with the Colts too. Again, a situation where you have a team coming off a bye week. They're at home. The circumstances line up pretty well for the Colts in this matchup. And I feel like the Texans are a little bit inconsistent. Give me the well-coached team in the Indianapolis Colts. I think this is a good spot for them. We have a case of a West Coast team going cross-country with this next one. Cliff Kingsbury, Kyler Murray, they're taking the air raid offense to the New York Giants facilities. I'm going to be interested to see this matchup. Daniel Jones hasn't really looked like Danny Dimes the last couple of weeks. He faced the number one defense in the NFL, so kind of hard to do that last Thursday night. They're 3-point favorites at home. I think that's about right. They get Evan Ingram back this week. They get Saquon back this week. Things are lining up just right for the Giants. I'm going to go ahead and take them. It'd be interesting if the Cardinals did win because then they move themselves into this 3-3-1 picture, which would kind of make them way better than a lot of people probably give them credit for.
Yeah. No, I think the Cardinals are more interesting than I had thought that they were going to be. And I still feel bad for Kyler Murray, but he's doing a fantastic job with that team. Even though we said, like, their line is awful, their team around them is bad, Kyler's doing a good job. That being said, I'll still take the Giants. They just have too many weapons coming back, especially Saquon's going to be a big difference maker, I think.
All right. So we're both on the Giants on that one. I hate this game. I hate this game so
I think I know which one you're talking about.
So much because both these teams are the worst teams to pick in the NFL right now. Eris, I'm looking you dead in the eyes right now on this one. Chargers, Titans. Okay, so the last few weeks, I've come out the better on this one in the sense of we've decided we're just going to split Titans games. You pick the Titans or I pick the opposite, either way. And you actually went first the last 2 weeks in picking this one. So I guess I have to break it up. I have to choose a team. You went with the Titans both weeks, so I'm going to go with the Titans on this one. I don't like doing it. I feel dirty. I feel like I have to take a hot shower after doing this. I'm betting on Ryan Tannehill. They benched Marcus Mariota this week. That's another headline that came out of the NFL. So Mariota, I think your time in the NFL is coming to an end, or at least as a starting quarterback.
But this is a bad game. And like the Chargers apparently cannot beat bad teams, right? Like, here's what I will say about the Chargers is they will play to the level of their competition. You have a good team outside of the Pats, right? They get owned by the Pats. But if you have a good team, the Chargers will play up and they might beat you. And if you have a bad team, they will play down and they might lose to you. So there's a real chance that the Chargers will lose this one. But to split the difference and continue with our trend, I will take the Chargers. But I'm sure they'll let me down.
I'm sure they will. In fairness, they'll have just as many fans in Tennessee as they did in LA, apparently.
I know that Steelers game surprised me how many Steelers the Steelers. We do have, I think, one of the best fan bases in the world. I think when it comes to sports, right? But I was not expecting them to fill up that entire stadium. But of course, that's only 1,000 people.
Oh yeah, I mean, playing at a high school football stadium over there, high school soccer stadium. Forgive me. Anyway, all right. So this is a bit of an interesting one. Saints going into Chicago. The Bears are a 4-point favorite. Bears, another team coming off a bye, another team at home. We do have the Saints. The Saints can't really win all these Teddy Bridgewater games, can they? Alvin Kamara is already ruled out too. That's another important piece to this game.
I still think who's quarterback on the Bears right now? Do you know?
I think they've announced that Mitch Trubisky should be healthy enough to start right now.
He should be healthy enough to start. I think the Saints' run has to come to an end at some point.
Law of averages.
Yeah.
You're going with the Bears then, I take it?
No, I'll still go Saints. The Bears are just bad. I just don't have a lot of faith in them. I know law of averages like we're talking about, but I'll go with the Saints still.
This is going to be an ugly game, I think. But I'm going to go with the Bears. I think, like I said, Teddy Bridgewater has been playing out of his mind for the last couple weeks. They're missing one of their core offensive pieces in Kamara. And Matt Nagy, he's a creative play caller. I'm sure he could figure out the Saints defense in a way that the last couple teams haven't. Plus, the Saints don't play as well on the road. So go ahead, and the weather's starting to turn. So go ahead and give me the Bears. So this is going to be the Lamar Jackson test. This is going to be how his season is measured because he's going on the road to face Seattle. And Seattle's defense hasn't looked nearly as impressive as we've come accustomed to with Pete Carroll out there. It's really been all Russell Wilson this year. The Seahawks are 3-point favorites. What do you think? Do you think that the Ravens can actually beat a good team?
I don't think so. And the Ravens, to me, they haven't looked that good ever since like the Steelers game, right? Where, we even lost Mason Rudolph. Like they still haven't looked that fantastic to me. If anything, they look like they're regressing and getting worse and worse. So I'm still going to take the Seahawks. I think the Seahawks are just a better team. And at the end of the day, Wilson just does what he does, right? And he finds a way to win.
I'm going to go different here. I know it's kind of a surprise by me, especially because I've been down on the Ravens. But from a strategy standpoint, I think I'm actually going to take the Ravens. Be a little different from you. And, hey, I just have success with these road dogs. Might as well keep up the tradition, right?
That you do. All
right, let me go ahead and go with the Ravens and the straight-up upset. The Sunday night game, there's a couple desperate teams right now, and I don't want to be any of these teams' publicists Monday morning if you're on the losing end. So we have the Eagles going into Jerry World this week. Both teams 3-3. The winner of this game is going to be at the top of the division. And in prime control of, I think, honestly, who's going to win it. Where do we see this game going? Because on my end, if I'm making my pick right now, and a lot of people are going to say this, I may be a Cowboy hater, but I'm actually going to go with you guys this week. I've seen Carson Wentz doesn't play as well against this team, to be honest. And Dak Prescott has had success against this Eagles defense. And he'll even have more success because I don't know if you noticed, the Eagles can't defend the pass. Yeah. If there was ever an opportunity for Dak Prescott and Kellen Moore and that entire coaching staff to finally turn things around in their passing game and look like they did all the way back in week 3, it would be this. Now, I got to say, thank you for the Laws last week because, damn, I was not expecting that beat down by the Jets of all teams, but kudos to you. You at least made my week, Cowboys fans, but I think I'm going to give it to you this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're playing in Jerry World. They're desperate. They need a win. I see the Cowboys taking it. And the Cowboys, I think, have won the majority of their past few games, at least in like the last 2 years. So I see that trend continuing. Like you said, the Eagles' defense, especially against the pass, just looked awful. So give me the Cowboys.
All right. Monday night. So second time these two teams have played already. Patriots going on the road to face the New York Jets. Patriots are a 10-point favorite in this matchup. This just adds into the narrative right now that the Patriots haven't played anyone good to this point in the season. But Sam Darnold came back last week, and this team looked a lot better for it. Like I said, they kicked the Cowboys' ass. Let's be honest about it. The game score did not match up to what I saw on the field because before blink and you miss it, they were already up 21-6 on the Cowboys with Sam Darnold back. So it tells you what a big difference maker he is for this team. Patriots aren't going to go undefeated. I'm going to do it. Give me the Jets on Monday night.
Wow. Okay. I think the Jets are much better with Darnold in. I agree, but I'm going to go the Patriots. I'm going to be different. I don't see the Patriots losing in their division.
Like I said, I just think that I have a hunch right now. They played a lot better. Adam Gase has actually coached pretty well against this team, and you can't hold it against him. The scraps he had at quarterback the last 2 times these teams met, the offense hasn't looked as good for the Patriots. I think things are lining up for an upset here. So,
I hope you're right. I 100% hope you're right, but I don't know if I see it. So,
all right, well, that's my crazy prediction of the week. Get the wacky buzzers. I don't know what that was. What sound was I making?
That was a pigeon. That's what that was.
I'm going to stop. All right, guys. Another successful week, another big episode right here. Thank you so much for sticking around with us through it. Like, we had a lot of different directions we had to go in this podcast, but you guys so far have been the best fans we could ask for. We shout out to all you. Dre, do you have something you want to say to the audience before we leave? Any fun plans for the weekend?
So I'm going to go to the United game, and then I finally get to watch El Camino. So I had to wait a week to watch El Camino for some of my friends to get back in town. That's the Breaking Bad movie, for those of you that don't know. So, but yeah, other than that, just having fun. Thanks again to all our listeners and everybody that's interacting with us on all of our social media. So we appreciate you.
Definitely keep following. We love all the support we're getting on Instagram. The meme game is most dank. I think you guys are definitely enjoying it. We appreciate all the fans that hate their teams so much to go ahead and give our memes a much cherished like. Thank you. Thank you again. We'll be back with another episode next week. Lucky number 13. Here we come. Follow us on Instagram at Slumpbuster Podcast, on Twitter at Slumpbuster Pod. But be sure to like, follow, subscribe. Definitely leave us some reviews. We have some good content coming up. The Fantasy Football Podcast. We have Get Your Popcorn, where we break down each and every sports movie. We're going through right now. We have the Major League review that just went up this week. Major League, a lot of fun movie. Highly recommended if you guys haven't watched it. Next week, we got Field of Dreams coming up. And here in a couple of weeks, we're looking at Space Jam. So branching out a little bit. So look forward to that one. Thanks once again. Catch you later. And thank you for listening to the podcast with Juju and Dre. Catch you next time.